collapse, major collapse.
Major collapse at the church. The church is on fire, major collapse.
The suspect, again, we're in the preliminary stages right now, was neutralized at 10:33:44 in the parking lot of that church. That suspect is a 40-year-old male from the city of Burton, who we identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford.
What in the world can we do to stem this tide of gun violence?
We need to have a conversation about gun violence, right? The Second Amendment doesn't mean any gun for anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Now, I honestly didn't want to do a video about this tragedy, but because it's top of mind for so many people of faith, I felt that it would be a great thing to just talk about the reporting that's going around concerning the shooting. So, in an article by CNN, What We Know About Michigan Church Shooter Thomas Sanford, they go through some details about him, how he was known around his small Michigan suburb for his distinctive pickup truck, which he often drove with 2 American flags flying from the bed behind him. Note how they're beginning to point out the American flag. And then finally, they park at this description saying, Sanford is registered to vote, but Michigan does not have partisan voter registration, a backdoor way of saying we can't really say if he's Republican or Democrat. And then they say a Google Street View photo from June of 2025 shows a Trump-Vance campaign sign on his home's fence, and a social media photo from 2019 showing Sanford wearing a Trump t-shirt. Everything engineered to simply say this guy belonged to the MAGA movement and they must be pleased with themselves. So you have this shooting at a Mormon church and it's horrific. The shooter rams into the building, opens fire on worshippers, and in the end 4 dead, 8 injured. And the angle that CNN wants you to remember is that the shooter had a Trump sign in his yard, not the fact that the victims were Christians, not the fact that the guy ranted against Mormons. No, Trump's yard sign, because of course, everything wrong with the world is Trump. Now, let's get this straight. Thomas Sanford was a disgraced ex-Marine. He drove his truck into a church, he opened fire on worshippers and torched the place with gasoline. He hated Mormons, and he said it. Witnesses claimed that he said it.
He did make the statement that Mormons are the Antichrist, which is a shocking statement. And again, this is somebody you're just meeting for the first time. There was anger. I mean, it was a long-standing anger that I'm speculating, but what he did took planning. It also took real motivation and real anger to ultimately do what he did.
The FBI calls what he did a targeted attack or targeted violence, but CNN, The Guardian, they'd rather turn it into a campaign ad against Trump. That's just disgusting, honestly. Meanwhile, here's the reality.
Hundreds of people were inside worshiping when police say the gunman rammed his car into the front doors. Authorities say he got out of the car and started shooting before officers arrived and exchanged fire with him, killing him. Police say the gunman deliberately set the church on fire. It was engulfed in flames for a couple of hours, and unfortunately, it is a total loss.
That's what Christians in Michigan faced on Sunday morning. Flames, gunfire, chaos.
I came to worship my Savior Jesus Christ, and I didn't expect this to happen, of course. And I've lost friends in there. And some of my little primary children that I teach on Sundays were hurt.
Paula lost her friends. Kids from her Sunday school class were injured. That's the real story. But don't expect CNN or the Times to highlight her voice. Instead, the same media suddenly forgets how to cover hate crimes when Christians are the victims. Then they pivot to campaign signs or gun violence or gun control.
The Second Amendment doesn't mean any gun for anyone, anywhere, anytime.
It's unreal. Here's the truth. A Christian church was attacked, and the media is more focused on smearing Trump than telling you why Christians are under attack in their own country. This wasn't about a yard sign. It was about faith. It was about hatred. And once again, the mainstream media covered the narrative they want, while Christians are left to pick up the pieces. It's early days yet, but the investigations and the reporting that we're getting so far is pushing to just one fact.
Well, from what I understand, based on my conversations with the FBI director, all they know right now is this was an individual who hated people of the Mormon faith.
I would like to talk about the elephant in the room. There have been a lot of speculations about whether Thomas shut up the Mormon church for political reasons, and that's why the leftists immediately jumped on it to say, hey, look, that's a MAGA mass shooter. Or was he just a mentally disturbed individual who, according to certain reports, hated the Mormon church because at one time he attended to integrate into the Mormon church, even had a relationship with a woman who was a Mormon, and for some reason, maybe they broke up. He was brokenhearted and held a deep grudge against the church and took it out on them eventually many years later by shooting up the church. Or was he simply someone who had dark designs against Christianity, because we have the narrative that this is an attack against Christianity? So far, number 2 is the option that seems to make more sense because of his prior history with the Mormon church and his rants against the Mormon church, as we've seen in interviews that are being released. So in the end, this is really not a political shooting or a politically motivated shooting. It is not a religiously motivated shooting, but it's a mix of a love relationship gone bad mixed with serious mental health issues, plus a veteran who happened to have access to firearms. So that was the mix that I think created this situation. I believe that when we face tragedy like this, we have to approach it with calm, even, measured perspectives and not jump immediately to pointing at the opposite side of the political aisle, claiming that the person who did this really bad thing is one of yours, and that proves that all of you are evil. It's quite tiring sitting back and watching the exchange from left to right. And even though, yes, I would say I identify as a conservative, I would prefer that incidents like this should not be used for political ammunition against people who don't vote the same way you do. That goes for both the left and the right. And so in the end, all of the noise about a Trump sign being seen on his fence and him wearing a Trump t-shirt and him being a veteran and flying the American flag doesn't immediately mean that people who do all these things are evil people, just like the narrative is being pushed. And it doesn't equally mean that if the roles were reversed and he had a Kamala Harris Walls sign on his fence and he wore an Obama 2008 t-shirt in a photo, doesn't mean that everyone who votes Democrat is evil. So we just need to tone down these expectations, because the framing that has gone into this entire conversation since the incident on Sunday gets really unhealthy for everyone when we begin to push certain things and try and force a round peg into a square hole. Thomas Sanford was a man who was mentally deranged, who hated Mormons, and his hatred drove him to open fire on a Mormon church. And hey, this was a white man opening fire on a predominantly white congregation. So CNN and the rest of them can't pull the race card. And so they have to find a Trump yard sign. That is how low they've sunk. Instead of focusing on the main story, this is what they want. They want to make it political so that they can take the heat off the many left-leaning attackers of ICE and the Charlie Kirk situation, they desperately want that MAGA extremist to be front and center to deflect from the rampant violence that we've seen in the United States over the last couple of months. Well, we're not buying it. Are you? Meanwhile, in Florida, a breaking report says that a proposed law is being pushed in the Florida legislature to allow armed volunteers provide church security without a professional security license. They intend to pass this everywhere, and they're saying that they need more good men with firearms at places of worship. This is a development that would possibly deter future attacks on places of worship, because places of worship and schools are soft targets when the assailants know that there is no one on the premises to resist their attacks with equal or overwhelming force. So this is a good move, and I'm sure that Democrats and progressives everywhere will be screaming and saying this is not the solution they were asking for, that they want to take away people's guns and so on. However, in a country where the criminals have easy access to guns and law-abiding citizens have to go through strenuous background checks and plenty of restrictions, and then they get punished when the criminals commit crimes, that doesn't look like a fair picture to me. So I think that this is a fair development coming from the state of Florida. So until the next time they figure out something hypocritical to do or something bogus to sell us, I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, God bless you. Thanks for watching, liking, and sharing this video. Please subscribe, leave a super thank, and join my membership to keep me doing this. A huge thank you to my supporters listed on the screen. Thank you for your donations and membership.